Judge Grayson had expected another open-and-shut case, another young delinquent to quickly dispatch before his golf game. Instead, he found himself presiding over a masterclass in legal dismantling delivered by the unlikeliest of defendants. The Los Angeles County Courthouse was thick with anticipation, the air practically vibrating with the unspoken question. Who was this kid? 19-year-old Jalen Dawson, accused of grand theft auto and resisting arrest, stood before the bench, hands in his pockets, a subtle defiance in his lifted chin. Judge Walter Grayson, initially dismissive, a smirk playing on his lips, leaned back in his chair. "You think you're some kind of legal expert?" he drawled. "This isn't a debate club, kid." Chuckles rippled to the courtroom. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, all seemed in on the joke. But Jalen wasn't laughing. Years of meticulously studying case law, of mock trials played out in his mind, while others as age-chased basketballs or digital dragons, had prepared him for this moment. His mother, a paralegal of 2 decades, had unwittingly molded him into a courtroom prodigy, her stories of legal shortcuts and biased judges serving as his unconventional textbooks. "Let's make this quick," Grayson sighed, flipping open the case file. "I have a golf game at 2. Another wave of chuckles, but Jalen's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. The judge had just made his first mistake. Prosecutor Mitchell Carrington rose, immaculate in his suit, his voice a practiced, confident drone. "Your Honor, the state will prove beyond shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Jalen Dawson, was caught red-handed in a stolen 2022 Audi A6. Officers pursued him through downtown, where he allegedly attempted to flee. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel." The words landed with crushing weight. It sounded damning, a clear-cut case. "Sounds straightforward to me," Grayson affirmed, glancing at Jalen, then back at Carrington. Carrington, sensing victory, continued. "The defense may try to convince you that this was all a misunderstanding, but let's be honest, what kind of victim runs from the police?" He paused for effect, eyes locking with Jalen. "Your Honor, I have here the testimony of Officer Daniel Ruiz, who personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel." Jalen remained silent, watching, waiting for cracks he knew would appear. When Judge Grayson turned to Jalen's public defender, Lisa Thornton, she nervously began, "Your Honor, my client." Jalen placed a hand on her arm, a silent command. She hesitated, then sat down. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." Jalen's calm, steady voice cut through the silence. The courtroom gasped. Carrington's smirk faltered, replaced by a sharp laugh. This should be interesting. He had no idea. The tension in the courtroom became palpable as Jalen, hands still in his pockets, took a slow step forward. "Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like to confirm something with the prosecution." Carrington, still smug, crossed his arms. "Go ahead. You said Officer Daniel Ruiz personally saw me behind the wheel before I was arrested, correct?" "That's right." Carrington exhaled, bored. "And that testimony is written in his report." "Of course it is." Jalen nodded, turning to Judge Grayson. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss that testimony as evidence." Grayson squinted. "On what grounds?" Jalen pulled his hands from his pockets, gesturing towards the prosecution's table. "Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began." Confusion flickered across Carrington's face. "What are you talking about?" "Your Honor, if the court allows me, I'd like to submit a request to verify Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night. If his report says he witnessed me in the vehicle, then it should match his location history. But he let the word hang in the air. I have a feeling it won't." The murmurs in the gallery swelled. Grayson frowned. Carrington cleared his throat, jaw tightening. "That report was filed by an officer of the law. Your Honor, are we really going to take the word of a defendant over a trained professional?" Jalen gave a small, almost casual shrug. "If the officer was where he claimed to be, then the GPS data will prove it. But if he wasn't..." He let the sentence trail off, the implication hanging heavy. Grayson studied him, then turned to Carrington. "Does the prosecution have any issue with verifying the officer's GPS logs?" Carrington hesitated. The pause, just long enough, was noticed by the jury, the gallery, and most importantly, the judge. Jalen took a quiet breath. Carrington finally shook his head. No objections, Your Honor. The shift had begun. The courtroom wasn't laughing anymore. The silence was loud. Carrington, his polished confidence cracking, shuffled his papers. Your Honor, while we wait for the GPS records, the fact remains that the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the stolen vehicle. That's true, Jalen conceded, his face unreadable. He turned to the jury, making eye contact with each one. The prosecution wants you to believe that finding my fingerprints in a car means I stole it. That's the story they're selling. But let's think about this logically. He took a deep breath, his tone calm, controlled. Let's say you walk into a department store and try on a jacket. You put your hands in the pockets, maybe zip it up, then put it back on the rack and walk out. A few hours later, someone shoplifts that jacket. Would the fact that your fingerprints are on it mean you stole it? A few jurors exchanged glances. Jalen didn't give them time to recover. The car in question was parked outside a 7-Eleven hours before the alleged theft. I was inside that store with 3 friends. And yes, when we walked past the car, I leaned against it. I even opened the door because it was already unlocked. Just a dumb moment of curiosity. I didn't take the car. I didn't drive it. I didn't steal anything from inside. He let that sit for a second, then, in a voice that cut to the silence like a scalpel, he asked, Does touching something make you a criminal? Carrington cleared his throat, frantically flipping through notes. And while we're on the topic, Jalen continued, let's talk about how that fingerprint analysis was done. Your Honor, was a forensic specialist from this case subpoenaed to testify? Grayson blinked, caught off guard. He glanced at Carrington. The prosecutor reluctantly mumbled, No. Jalen's lips pressed together. So, let me get this straight. The state is using forensic evidence to try and convict me. But they didn't think it was necessary to bring in the actual specialist who processed that evidence? No chance for me to cross-examine, ask about the chain of custody, or challenge the accuracy of the analysis. Carrington's jaw tightened. Interesting, Jalen concluded, as if that was all he needed to hear. Judge Grayson sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose, the realization dawning that this case was anything but an easy win. But Jalen wasn't done. What he was about to say would change everything. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence an official statement from the owner of a vehicle. Grayson frowned. The owner? Yes, Mr. Raymond Whitaker, the registered owner of the stolen Audi, provided a statement to the police that, for some reason, was never submitted in the prosecution's filings. And I think I know why. He turned to Carrington. Do you recall what Mr. Whitaker told officers the night his car was reported stolen? Carrington's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what was coming. Jalen didn't wait. He pulled out a printed transcript and read aloud. I left my car running when I ran inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off. But it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid, and he was white. A collective gasp ripped through the courtroom. Jalen held the paper aloft. That's from the original police report. The same report the prosecution conveniently never mentioned. The arresting officer admitted this from his testimony. The prosecution ignored it. And yet, they want this juror to believe that I, someone who doesn't even match the description of the real thief, am guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Carrington scrambled forward. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was caught in possession of the vehicle. No, I wasn't. Jalen's voice, though not raised, cut through the courtroom with sharp precision. I was arrested blocks away from where the vehicle was abandoned, walking home after getting snacks with my friends. I wasn't in the car. I wasn't near the car. I wasn't running from anything. The only thing tying me to this case is bad police work and assumptions. Judge Grayson let out a slow breath, rubbing his temple. The case was unraveling, and everyone knew it. Jalen turned back to the jury. The real suspect got away that night. The officers found a black kid in the same general area and decided that was close enough. That's what this case is really about. Silence. Grayson cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Does the prosecution have anything further? Carrington, stiff and flushed, could only manage, "No, Your Honor." Judge Grayson exhaled, looking at Jalen for a long moment, then at the jury. Finally, he leaned forward and spoke the words that would stay with everyone in that room. Case dismissed. A beat of stunned silence. Then chaos. Reporters scribbled. The gallery stirred, some in disbelief, others in quiet relief. Jalen didn't move immediately, letting the reality sink in. Judge Grayson, still gripping his gavel, looked at Jalen with an unreadable expression. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Recognition, maybe even regret. Jalen met his gaze, then turned to leave. But just as he reached the door, the judge spoke again. "Mr. Dawson?" Jalen stopped, but didn't turn. Grayson hesitated, then finally said, "You should consider law school." Jalen smirked. He didn't need to consider it. He was already on his way. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with the clamor of reporters. "Jalen, did you know the judge would dismiss the case? What are you going to do next? How does it feel to outmaneuver a seasoned prosecutor?" Jalen pulled his hoodie over his head, ignoring the barrage. This wasn't about spectacle. This wasn't about proving how smart he was. It was about something bigger. His mother, Denise, waited at the bottom of the steps, arms crossed, her face a mixture of relief and stern disapproval. "Boy, you scare me half to death," she finally breathed, pulling him into a tight hug. "You always was a stubborn one." The cameras flashed, but Jalen wasn't paying attention. Across the street by his car, Judge Grayson watched. The arrogance was gone from his posture, replaced by something closer to reflection. He hadn't expected this case to be anything more than routine. But now, he knew he'd remember this one, because Jalen had done something most people never could. He made the system look at itself, and for once, it blinked first. The lesson was stark. How many other cases had gone this way? How many people convicted? Not because of evidence, but because of biased shortcuts and a system that cared more about closing cases and finding the truth. Jalen had the knowledge to fight back. But what about the ones who didn't? This wasn't just about one case. It was about all of them. He knew what he had to do next. This courtroom wouldn't be the last one he stood in, but next time, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the attorney. And when that day came, he wouldn't be the only one.